By adding new initiatives or increasing spending in specific areas, other areas might lose their budget. What specific events will decrease funding to do so?
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think what it comes down to is not necessarily pulling money away from one event to enhance another. I think what it comes down to is really at the beginning of the year, sitting down as an executive team, going through all of our events and evaluating them to see how much value they're currently adding to students. So to making sure that the objective that this proposed event is actually meant to achieve is being achieved and students are getting out of it what they deserve. So I think if we really evaluate and we look at these events, we can see where there's areas to pick and choose to either add money or decrease money, not because one event is more deserving than the other, but because perhaps there's more interest or there's more value in certain events. Some events may serve more students than others, but I don't think it comes down to, taking away something drastic from one event to enhance another. And I think if our team really comes together and we work hard on corporate relations and really stressing the value that the events provide, we'll see a lot of support on that end and we'll be able to successfully hold all of our events without having to drastically decrease the value that any of them provide.
Thank you. Steph made some really good points. I think it's really important that we keep every event going. The diversity of our events currently is what keeps different groups of people coming out and involved, and I think we need to maintain that relationship that we currently have. In a way to do that and not pull funding, we need to increase our amount of corporate relations and increase our amount of outreach. Something I've done personally already this year is reach out to True North Sports and Entertainment with personal connections and get prizes and stuff out of them that we haven't had. And so creating new relationships with bigger companies here in Winnipeg, but also small startup organizations as well, will create lasting relationships that we can benefit from for years to come.
How do you plan on ensuring all points on your platform are met this year?
Great question. Time, effort, dedication. That's what I want to do throughout the next year coming up. I will be pouring my blood, sweat, and tears, likely literally, into the CSA. And that is what means most to me, and that's the reason I'm running, is for the students. So I want to ensure that the promises I'm making are ones that I can keep, and I will follow through. That said, everything on Steph's platform is also great ideas, and I will definitely embrace anything that the students want to see, anything that can be brought forward, and I will always be there to answer any questions or take on new ideas.
Okay, I'm really excited by this question because it's something that I've really committed to for this next year. So like I talked about in my speech, I think I have done a good job in the past of following through on the promises that I've made. So before I decided to run, I went back and I looked at my platform from last year. I saw, okay, what have I accomplished? And I do still have the remainder of my term left. What am I going to really commit to accomplishing by the end of this term? So that's why my platform is made up of not only big ideas, but also smaller things that would enhance people's everyday experience at Asper. So those are the things that I think are really simple to accomplish. They're not big things that students are asking for, but they're things that the CSA has the ability to provide and that we can commit to accomplishing. For my bigger ideas, I've already gone ahead and met with various stakeholders, with the dean, with the young associates like I talked about, to ensure that the promises I'm making are actually attainable and that I'm not giving students false hope. So like I said, there are smaller things that I'm already working on implementing every day that I don't think are going to be too burdensome. But for the bigger things, I have made sure before promising students anything that they are things that will be achievable and that I'm excited to accomplish next year.
Being president can require lots of time commitment and flexibility. How does your time commitment look like over the next year if elected?
Okay, yes, it is very true. Being president, or frankly any member of the CSA or a STAG, anytime you're involved with a student group, it takes a lot of time, which is very fair. My commitment, well, what I've always lived by, I should start by saying, is that if you want something done, you should ask a busy person to do it. And that's something that's always rang true in my life. It's something that I've noticed is that I'm always happier, I'm always working better, and I'm always more productive when I'm busy. So by no means is this going to be a light year for me. If elected, I would obviously give my whole self to being CSA president. I am also co-chairing the JDC West 2021 competition, like I talked about. But those are things that I've thought about before running for this position, and I know that it's something that I'm capable of. I will be taking a lighter course load, 3 classes most likely. I do have all of my electives left, so school will not have to suffer. But I am committed to dedicating myself and not having to sacrifice my efforts in one area to give to another. I know that it's something that I'm capable of, and I've been doing it for the last 9 months as both VPI and the chair of the organizing committee, so this isn't something that's new to me.
I will absolutely be pouring all of my time and focus into the CSA. My only other commitment is graduating, hopefully, next April. And I will accomplish that as well by having a very spread out small course load. I'm only planning to take 3 courses for the remainder of my terms here, and that'll complete my degree. Yeah, so throughout the next 12 months, all of my focus will be on the CSA and the CSA alone.
How specifically do you plan on accomplishing platform points that are not in direct control of the CSA?
For starters, it'll be reaching out to new partners. So in the example of funding, that's definitely something that is sometimes out of our control. A lot of organizations want more cash, and sometimes it's cash we don't have. So starting there with kind of creating new opportunities, creating new partnerships in terms of funding. Another strong point for something that's out of my control is the more involvement. So I know there are a lot of events going on every day. Something I've spoke to is I look at my calendar and go, my goodness, there's an event every single night of the week and I can't attend them all. So something I'd like to do is try to create more integrative events. I was able to attend the UMFO and ANU Fondue and Finance, and it was great. It was 2 stags working together, and instead of having 20 students out at 2 separate events, taking up 2 different nights, we had 50 plus students out at one event, all working together. And I think that will help grow the Asper School of Business in terms of our diversity, in terms of our connectivity, right? We have an opportunity to speak to each other more, collaborate more, and kind of integrate each of our experiences into fewer, allowing more opportunities to attend more events.
Okay, so this is a great question. Something that I'd like to note, and something that I've learned through my role this year as VPI, from attending conferences like Roundtable and NBSC, and being able to interact with and speak to other schools that have similar students associations, is something that many Asper students don't realize is just how much power we actually do have as the CSA, and just how lucky we are to have the resources and the support that we do garner. So I do think that it's not fair to underestimate ourselves as the CSA. I think when we go and we have meetings, when we talk about what's important to us, and more importantly to the students, we are taken seriously, and I have seen that on multiple occasions. I currently sit on the Faculty Council and the Undergraduate Program Committee, where the faculty and the staff at Asper ask for myself and the president's opinions on what students want, what's important to them, and they've always been quite supportive. So I don't necessarily think there's anything that's so out of our control. I think we can advocate for things to the best of our abilities, but I think as long as we show that something is important to the students, and at the end of the day that is our job as a CSA team, people do take us seriously, and we can only do as much as we can. But like I said, I do think we have the ability to control a lot more than people think, and that would really be my goal for next year, is to have more students understand just how much the CSA is capable of helping them, and wanting to reach out for those resources and for those services, and understanding that what we do at the end of the day is really for them and about them.
President is a large role that requires lots of experience. How do you think your past experience will help you in your role if elected?
Well, like I said before, experience isn't everything, and I definitely don't want to create that idea in people's minds, because I do want people who don't necessarily have CSA experience to feel comfortable joining the team, volunteering at our events, getting involved with committees. That being said, I do believe I have a lot of relevant experience for this role. Like I talked about, I've been extremely involved in the Asper student community basically since day one. I was the first year representative in my first year. So that was essentially me leading a team of 11 other first years and being the voice for first year students, not only to the CSA, but really to the Asper student body in general. Since then, I've held other roles on the CSA, like I talked about, the professional development co-chair, and also have experience at the committee level as the PR coordinator for 5 days last year. But really, I'd say my most relevant experience would be this year. As VPI, I've really gotten to see the inner workings of the CSA. I've gotten to understand how much resources, how much power we actually do have, and what our weaknesses are, what our strengths are, and what we can leverage next year. So I would say really taking everything I've learned from this year, with this year being my first year at an executive level, and really leveraging that to make next year bigger and better than ever. But yeah, like I said, experience isn't always everything, so I definitely don't want to get that idea in people's minds.
The experience I have and to bring to the table for the CSA is not necessarily directly involved with Asper. As Steph pointed out, it's not necessarily necessary to be a leader here in Asper first or a part of the Executive Council. There's lots of opportunities to come from outside. But the leadership experience I do have stems from outside of the Asper School. I've coached sports teams of 20 plus individuals, all very diverse, ranging in ages. So great experience coming from outside in, and that ability to take that new perspective. I definitely have what it takes to commit that time as a leader inside the Asper School of Business just as well as I have previously outside of the Asper School of Business.
CSA, STAGS, and the CDC are always competing in terms of their events. Do you have any tangible ideas on how all three parties can collaborate this upcoming year?
Absolutely. So something I started to speak about previously was connecting the Career Development Center. I've spoken with Kelly, Meredith, other individuals in the CDC and the co-op program, pardon me. I've also spoken with a number of STAG presidents and of course acting on behalf of the CSA. I definitely want to bring all of those organizations together. Integrative events which encompass more students are very important, and I think it will be very beneficial. I think the main focus here is improving the lines of communication between each of these organizations. So willing to take more time, whether it's in-person meetings, setting up a drive or a chat or a Facebook group, whatever it is, to kind of better communicate, but mostly just making the time for each person and making sure that each person's voice is heard. That'll lead to a more collaborative environment.
So this is something that's actually been really huge for me this year as VPI. Like I talked about in my platform, one of my goals would be to better publicize the resources available to students next year. So that's not just for students seeking help or advice, it's also just for students to understand what's available to them and all the opportunities that they do have so that they can take ample advantage of those opportunities. So this year I tried to do that by working with the STAGs really closely on a shared Google Drive where all of our resources were pooled together. We also used a shared STAG calendar so that both the CSA executive and the STAG executives looked at the calendar before booking any of their own events to ensure nothing else was happening on that day to the best of their abilities. We're very busy here in Asper. So that we're not competing with each other because we really want to support and leverage all of the events happening. Another thing that's been huge this year, and that I want to commend the STAGs on, is really the cross-collaboration between the STAGs. So this is something that I was really aiming for last year when I ran for VPI, but the STAGs have just taken it and run with it. They've had the RBC Career Cafe, where all the STAGs were involved. They also have the upcoming STAG Showcase. So that's a perfect example of how we can really work together, and instead of competing for the same members and for the same ticket sales, we can help each other by posting all of the same graphics, by collaborating, by hosting a lot of the same events in unison. And that way, students are getting the most out of what we have to offer them, and they're not having to pick and choose because they simply can't attend everything. So that would be something I'd love to continue into next year, but something that I think we can also really learn from how the STAGs have done it this year.
A big part of being the CSA president is creating and maintaining a good culture of the council you oversee. What kind of culture do you see yourself creating?
My number one goal for next year would be to create a culture where everyone feels wanted, but more importantly, everyone feels like they have just as much a right to be there as the person next to them. So something that I think we could really work on is, we all talked about how many resources and services the CSA provides, but a lot of times we see that it's the same students coming back to these resources and attending these events. And that's not to say that the students who aren't coming is because, they're not interested or they don't care. I think a lot of times it has to do with not feeling welcomed, not understanding that they have equal opportunity. So my number one goal would be to create a culture where the CSA is for everyone. Like I said, it's more than just a 60-person team. It's truly meant to be for the entire student body. So I would really want to build a council around me that helps embody that helps bring people in, pull them closer, and remind them that everything we offer is just as much for them, and that they have just as much a right to every opportunity as anyone else in the building. And that would be number one for me in terms of team culture.
We've spoken a lot about equality, inclusiveness, but it goes beyond that for me. It's more about comfortability, right? I want people to feel welcome. I want people to feel on the same level. I definitely, something I've expressed to other people already, is I want to take the time to sit down with every single individual, not only on my executive, but on the entire general council, right? Like, let's go out for coffee. Let's develop a personal relationship first, because in my past experience, it is significantly easier to build a professional relationship when you've already established a personal relationship with that person. Whether that means learning about your family, learning about your life outside of Asper, those are important things to me that I do want to learn about everyone, right? It's important to me that you feel on the same level as me. I don't look at it as a pyramid of president, executive, general counsel. I look at it as one team, right? We are one Asper. We are supposed to represent every single individual. We've already spoken about how every single member of Asper is a member of the CSA, but I know that that is not how every member of Asper feels. And that is something I want to work towards, is making sure that everyone feels like their voice is heard, whether that's more events to communicate directly with the students, whether that's more opportunities to speak to us, maybe outside the office. Like, let's get the executives out studying on the 3rd floor. Let's get people in a more neutral location where it's easier to approach us, right? I know that I'm in my 4th year. I still feel intimidated walking into the CSA office sometimes. I know the boardroom look is very necessary, but it kind of hurts that reputation a little bit, right? So I want to make that more of an open door, more of a revolving door.
How do you plan on demonstrating transparency between students and the CSA?
My first big idea is I'd really like to push for having a town hall type meeting, hopefully in June, kind of the general council meeting. So obviously, with confidentiality in mind, we would have any matters that are kind of closed in advance, and then hold the rest of the general council meeting at a time where it was open to the public. So I'd really like to invite out every single student, if possible, to host it in 343 or host it in 122, have an opportunity for every student to see our vision, right? By the time June has rolled around, the new team will have been in office for a full 2 months, so we should have a pretty good idea of where we're going for the rest of the year. So an opportunity to share that with students before we hit the new school year, right? I'd also like to be able to reach first-year students, incoming students, direct entry students, Red River transfers sooner, right? Reaching out in August, it's too late. People are enjoying the ends of their summer, they're on holidays, they're not checking their emails. We could be connecting with those individuals sooner. I spoke with one first-year student today or earlier this week, who was a fairly involved person, I would say, but he said upon arriving here on orientation day, he didn't know TCW was a thing, and then said to me, I guess this is what I'm doing this week. That's something I'd like to avoid, right? Like, let's get that communication out there sooner. Let's be more open.
Okay, so transparency is actually the main pillar behind my last platform point, which will be shared tomorrow, so stay tuned. But I'll just give you a little bit of an idea of how I plan to enhance this. The first idea I have is to have an anonymous feedback portal available on the CSA website 24/7, so that it's accessible to students and that they can provide feedback to us. I think having it be anonymous is extremely important, because as much as we say, come to us, give us your ideas, tell us what we can improve upon, and I do encourage that, I think a lot of students, frankly, just don't feel comfortable doing so. So it'd be really important to have something that's accessible to them 24/7. I think that'll help increase transparency. But beyond that, I also think it's important, again, to just remind students that they are always welcome. So our general council meetings, for example, are in no way closed to members of the CSA. If anyone wishes to attend, I would encourage that. In fact, if they're looking at potentially getting involved in the future or next year, that's also a great idea to sort of see how the council works. But I also think it just comes down to our mentality as people on the CSA. So the way we interact with each other, the way we interact with our classes and with our peers really speaks to how willing we are to be transparent and to be honest. I do think that's something that I try and embody every day. That's something that I would try and instill in my team in the future and among all members of the CSA Council. So yeah, I think it comes down to each of us making a commitment to the students to be as transparent as possible and reminding them that they have opportunities and resources available to see more about the CSA and to give us their honest feedback.
So we only have time for one more question. I want to apologize to everyone who asked questions online that I didn't get to, but our last question is actually a question from the audience. So I'll send it to them.
Hello. Oh, gee. Okay, I have a question for Steph. So you mentioned that you want to focus on some smaller things. Could you give an example of a small thing that affects us on a daily basis and how you want to fix it?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So this is something I've talked to a lot of students about. Like I said, it's not always the big events and the big opportunities that matter most. I think it's a lot of time it's about the little things that we can do. So something I talked about was just helping have more study space available. I know that's something that may not seem pressing to everyone, but it is huge for students, especially in terms of exams, which is why I talked about the idea of arranging for classrooms to be open for students to use. This is actually something that's already available and that students can do. They can book classrooms for themselves. But again, it's something that many students just frankly don't know about. So I'd love to better publicize that resource and even potentially add that to the CSA website where they can go online and see what rooms are available to them and book that. So when you have a group project meeting, when you need a quiet place to study, that's available. Another way of doing this is reminding students that the CSA office and the breakout room is also accessible to students to study. So if they're looking for a quiet place to be, if they want to focus, they can do that there. Another example of this would just be providing more, free coffee days, student appreciation week, things like that that just remind students that we do care about the student experience here, and that helps brighten their day, makes their day-to-day life a little bit more enjoyable. We love doing the free pastry days, the free coffee days. We're really lucky to have sponsors that are really willing to help us out with this. So I think just continuing to do more of this and making the Drake Center somewhere students want to be is really important. I've got lots of other ideas. I don't want to take up too much time, but come find me after and I can tell you the rest.